Good. We said that there were 54 commandments in Parshat Re'eh. 54 commandments. You can count them. And now we're almost finished. The commandments, we have like 10 more to go. We talked about them. Among many, covering the blood and taking the sacrifices have to be done in the holy temple, and the commandment of the false prophet. Today, I hope we'll get to learning about the masit and the madiach, a Jew that tries to convince another Jew to turn away from Torah and the commandments, and the madiach and the whole city, Irani Dachat, gets pushed away to serving idols. So, but let's learn a couple of other commandments over here. Let's see. Number one commandment here. I think this is where we got up to now. Here we go. A negative commandment. So we said there are 54 commandments. I think we've already done about 40 of them. So let's see. You have a negative commandment not to be stingy when it comes to charity. Giving charity, you're supposed to be open-handed. Negative commandment, don't be stingy. Positive commandment, do give charity to poor Jews. You should give charity to everybody, but the commandment is to give to a Jew. If you give charity to a poor Jew, then you have fulfilled a commandment. As you see, there's a lot of details here involved, but we haven't got time to go through all the details. If you wanted, there's a book called Mitzvot Hashem. I think it's also in English. Next time I'll even try to find it in English. Then this is listed all the 613 commandments according to the Rambam. There's different opinions about what the 613 are. Small differences, but and then also in this book, there's also general principles. What are the 7 Noahide commandments? What are the 7 mitzvahs of the Rabbanan? General commandment, what things are, is there punishment of getting beaten for, which are not getting beaten, etc. Okay, so positive and negative commandment. Don't be stingy when it comes to charity, and do give charity with an open heart. Positive and negative commandment. Next page. These are the commandments of Parshat Re'eh, right? Negative commandment. Do not hold yourself back from giving loans, to loan money to a Jew. In a way, it says that's the best form of charity. The best form of charity is to give a loan, because then the person who you're loaning to doesn't feel like he's worthless. Now, as you say, I'm giving this to you as a loan, pay me back. Whenever you can, you pay me back. But you let the person know that you want the money back. Not that you really, in fact, do necessarily want it back, but in order to give the person a value so that he feels that he's not a receiving charity, but he's becoming sort of a partner. Negative commandment. If you have a Jewish male servant, there's the law of Eved Ivri. That we mentioned elsewhere in the Torah, but the commandment is that if a Jew either becomes very poor, or if he steals money, can't give it back, so that either he can sell himself in the first case, or the court can sell him in the second case, he becomes an Eved Ivri. It says, when you send him free, do not send him free without paying him. You have to give him money for the time that he served you. Positive commandment. The negative commandment is don't send him away empty-handed. Positive commandment, do send them away with a, how do you say, a present. Give him something, give him money for the time that he's served you. Negative commandment, do not do any work with an animal that has been sanctified for sacrificing in the temple. Negative commandment, do not shear sheep which have been sanctified for the temple. Next commandment, don't eat chametz 6 hours before Pesach. On Passover, of course, it's forbidden to eat chametz. This week's Torah portion talks about the holidays also. There's several Torah portions that do. But this lists the holidays. And it's one of the portions that's read on the intermediate days of Passover and Sukkot, Aser, Taser. Don't eat chametz. On Passover, the commandment, the prohibition from chametz is written elsewhere. Here, there's a commandment not to eat Pesach, not to eat chametz before Passover, 6 hours right before Passover. 6 hours approximately. 6 hours before Passover. After midday, you're not supposed to eat chametz. Negative commandment. What was called, when you went up to the Holy Temple, you had to bring what was called an Olat Riyah and an Olat Chagiga. And you had to bring a sacrifice for the holiday, and then you also had to bring a sacrifice for that particular holiday, and you also had to bring a sacrifice in general for the happiness of the holiday. There was a Riyah, you had to bring us Olas Riyah. So here it says, a negative commandment, there was a chagiga, was one of the offerings that you had to bring for every one of the sacrifices. Well, it had to be eaten totally. You shouldn't leave any of it over. The chagigas erev Pesach, it came with the Passover. When you brought the Pesach, Paschal lamb, so they also brought other offerings together with it, so for the happiness of the meal, and the Paschal lamb would be eaten the last thing on this meal. So you're not supposed to leave anything over from either of these types of meat, both from the Pesach lamb and also from the Chagigat Pesach. You can't leave it over. It says 3 days after you're supposed to, before 3 days are finished, you're supposed to eat it. Positive commandment, to be happy in the holidays. Like it says, V'samachta b'chagecha. In the meal, you're supposed to drink wine, eat meat, give presents to the children. It's a commandment to be happy in the holidays. Positive commandment. This is the last one we have. That every male Jew over 13 should come to the Holy Temple 3 times a year. Like it says, Shlosh Pamim Yira'eh Kol Zechorcha et Penei Hashem Elokecha. 3 times. And the last commandment here, this is a negative commandment. That's the last positive commandment. Negative commandment. Don't go up to the temple on the 3 holidays empty-handed. You have to bring a sacrifice. Lo yarei et penei reikam. You have to come with a sacrifice. That, like we said, the holiday sacrifices. So you have to come with some sort of a sacrifice to bring for the holidays. Of course, on Passover, we had to bring the Paschal lamb. But in addition to that, you also had to bring what's called an Olat Riyah. A Riyah. And then you also had to bring a Chagiga, which was a shlomim that everybody ate from. And that ends the 54 commandments of this week's Torah portion. And now let's go into the Torah portion itself. Let's see how we're going to do this here. All right. And now we're talking about, good, we're back to our Torah portion. Torah reading, Parshat Re'eh. And like we said, it goes from one topic to another because there's 54 commandments. But in general, it's talking about the temple, the sacrifices, the food, the holidays that centered around the temple. And we have 3 different types of warnings about idolatry. There's the false prophet, there's the individual masid, and then there's the city that gets pushed away to idolatry. So we'll see if we can jump over to that. Let's go. Here we have hinted at the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And it will be the place that God chose, both for himself, to make his name dwell there. There you will bring all the sacrifices that I tell you to bring. Olotechem, zivchechem. Ola is a sacrifice that's totally devoured on the zivchechem, masrosechem. The ola is the sacrifices that are completely burned up. Zevach are the other types of sacrifices. Maestros, they would bring the maaser to the Kohen. Trumat yedchem, also same thing to the Levite and the Kohen. Trumat yedchem, the kol mivchar nidrechem, and the best of your vows that you vow to God. Let's see what he says. Rashi. And will be a place. There will be a place. Bano lechem beit bechira. Now, when the Jews left Egypt, very shortly after the temple, after the Torah was given, so the Jews built a tabernacle. Right, the tabernacle they built less than a year after the Torah was given. They built a tabernacle in the desert. This tabernacle, we learned about that, the shape of it, where the altar was, and where the Holy of Holies was, with the tablets, and the menorah was there with the showbread, with the inner altar and the outer altar. The inner altar was for incense, and the outer altar was for the sacrifices. Well, when they came into the land of Israel, they built also a temple, a tabernacle, in a place called Gibon. And then afterwards, in Gilgal. And then after, right, is that right? Gilgal. And then afterwards, and that only lasted like 14 years. And then they built a really sort of a permanent one in Shiloh. And that lasted for 369 years. So it's lasted almost as long as the temples did. First temple was 410 years, second temple was 420 years. So this one is talking about which one was this talking about? And this was talking about when you come to Israel, you're going to build a permanent temple. And after that, that's going to end all sacrifices anywhere else. You have to sacrifice in Jerusalem. So it says, this is talking about, this commandment here is talking about the one in Jerusalem. And that's what God said to King David. That King David, he laid the plans for the first temple. When the king was in his home, and God quieted the land down from all of its enemies. And the king said to Natan Navi, to the prophet Natan, Re'ina, look, I'm living in a house of wood. Aaron Elokim, and the Ark of God, Yoshev B'toch Yiriot, is in a place that as a roof is made of just curtains. So therefore, that's when King David laid the plans now for the first temple, and that's where it's hinted at. There's going to be such a thing like this. It says, Shama Taviu, there, only in this temple you should bring. Above it says, where it's talking about before, Lo batanarata el menucha vel nachala. What's the menucha and the nachala? So it says the menucha is Shiloh. The temple was going to be more permanent, and the menucha, that's Shiloh. And the nachala, the place where you're going to inherit, that's going to be Jerusalem. So like we said, Shiloh lasted for a long time. So it says, what happened? There. Okay. So it says up above that we talked about, that was talking about Shiloh. And here it's talking about Jerusalem. Okay, and therefore, Chelkom HaKatsuv, it says, Litain, Heter, Ben Zulazu. Therefore, between Shiloh and Jerusalem, there was like 54 years when it was allowed to make sacrifices, free will sacrifices in your backyard. You can make what was called a bama. Shemishacharvo Shiloh, that when Shiloh was destroyed and the temple was built in a place called Nov temporarily, and then it also got destroyed, and it came to a place called Givon. In that short amount of time, the Bamot were mutarim. This was about, says what, 54 years. What does he say that over here? Anyway, that's what it was. So interesting, right? When they were in the desert, also it was forbidden to make a sacrifice in your backyard, only there. But when they came into the land of Israel in Gilgal, 14 years, they could make sacrifices in their backyard, right? They couldn't make, they build a boma, only free will offerings. And between Shiloh and the first temple also. So it says, Usmachtam l'fnei Hashem Elokechem, and that's where you should go 3 times a year. I'm sorry, yeah. Yeah, it says that L'shaken shamo shama, what does it say here? To, again, when you come to the place that God chooses to make his name dwell there, bring your, why 2 times there? So interestingly here it says the Bal HaTurim says, Rem is l'shtei mechitzot. This hints at the 2 curtains that were in the second temple. One was for the Kodesh Kodashim and one was for the Kodashim Kalim. Right, that he separated between the 2, the Holy of Holies and the outside. Okay, back to our topic. You're going to build a 3rd temple, a 2nd temple. I'm sorry, let's go back. You're going to build a 1st temple. And that was supposed to be permanent, but they sinned, so a 2nd temple also. Okay, and then they sinned. Okay, so you're going to make a 3rd temple. The 1st temple was supposed to be the eternal one. And it says you'll build this temple and you should rejoice there in front of God, you and your sons and your daughters, your servants and your maidservants, the Levi, which is in your gates, because he hasn't got any portion with you. The Levites, they were the tribe that didn't have any portion. They didn't have a place to live. All the other tribes, they got an area in Israel where they lived, not the Levites. Beware. Maybe you will sacrifice a sacrifice in any place that you see. This is the negative commandment. We learned it's a positive commandment to take your sacrifices to the Holy Temple, and a negative commandment to take them anywhere else. Don't make a sacrifice any place where it raises up in your heart, but you have to do it. But where your heart, you can't. But according to a prophet, you are allowed to make a sacrifice in other places, like Elijah the prophet did on Mount Carmel. Now, what did Elijah do on Mount Carmel? Over there was the Jewish people, like we say, the Jewish people have this propensity for worshiping idols. They like idols. So they at this time they decided to worship this idol. It was called the Baal. There's another idol called Bal HaTurim, but this is the Baal. It's some sort of a worshiping the sun worship. In any case, everyone was doing it. So Elijah the prophet said, is anybody with me? And nobody agreed. So he said, okay, you know what? We're going to make a battle to the end. Me against all of the other prophets and the priests of this Baal. And we'll see what. So it ended up, it's a long story, beautiful story. It's written in the book of Kings. It says, I'll build an altar, you'll build an altar. We'll see who you put your sacrifices on it. I'll put my sacrifice on it. And we'll see who brings fire from heaven. If your God brings fire from heaven, then you guys are right. If I bring it, then I'm right. And he says to the Jewish people, but don't believe in 2 things. Don't say you worship also God and also the Baal. Of course, this is all in Mount Carmel. So sure enough, the fire came down from him and burned it up. Well, hey, 1 minute. What do you mean? Came down from him. He made a sacrifice outside of the temple. You can't do that. Elijah the prophet was in the middle of the first temple. You can't make sacrifices outside, right? Wrong. A prophet, a true prophet, is allowed to make sacrifice. And in fact, he can do anything, or even transgress a sin, except for idolatry. We learned that yesterday. Outside of the temple. Idolatry. So, I'm sorry. He can do any sin and tell the Jewish people even to do a sin one time, temporarily, except for idolatry. That's the only one. If it's temporary, he can do it. That's just strange, but true. If he's a true prophet. It says, Olatecha b'kol makom asher tireh. Says, if you look, the last letters are Kar, Mel, Ha Carmel. Hey, that's talking about the mountain Har Carmel. How did the Bal HaTurim see that? But he saw Safe Thomas Ha Carmel. Not only that, the word Bakal is the same numerical value as Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet. It's that Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, he did make the sacrifice outside of the temple. You can only go to the place where God chose in one of your tribes. Then you should make your sacrifice. Which one tribe? Benjamin. The Holy Temple was in the part of Benjamin. That's where it was. But above it says it's a place of all of the tribes. How can it be if it's only from Benjamin? So the answer is like this. When King David bought this area where the temple was going to be built, he bought it from Arvana, Yavusi, Aravna, Hayavusi. Is that right? Aravna or Arvana? Anyway, he collected money from all of the tribes. So everybody had a portion in it. Aravna. Nevertheless, the place where he bought, where did he buy? It was from the money of everybody. But where was it? It was only in the tribe of the area of Benjamin, which Benjamin was right next to Yehuda. But if you want to eat meat, then you're allowed to eat meat. As much as you desire, you're allowed to slaughter and eat meat as the blessing, according to the blessing of God, in all of your gates. Hatomeh v'hatahor. It can be, doesn't have to be pure meat. It can't be, but an offering that was given in the Holy Temple, it has to be what's called tahor. It can't be to touch the dead body or whatever there. But food that you eat in your house, it can have touched the dead body or be in the same room as a dead body. There's nothing wrong with that. A tameh v'tahor yochlad katzvir b'cha'ayil, just like a deer and a mountain goat. A deer and a mountain goat, they cannot be sacrificed in the temple, so you don't have to observe the laws of purity and impurity. They just have to be kosher animals. So it says the same thing. Everything that you eat on your own, right? On your own, it doesn't have to be holy meat. You don't have to bring it to the temple if you want to eat a chicken or you want to eat a steak or something like that. This is talking about so this is talking, at first glance, this is talking about anything you want to eat, right? Like I just finished saying. Says Rashi, that's not what it's talking about. It's not talking about. What is this talking about? This is talking about meat that you brought to the Holy Temple and you wanted to bring it as a sacrifice, but there occurred a blemish in the animal. So the commandment is that you're supposed to redeem this animal, give money, and buy another animal in the place. And this animal that a blemish fell in it, if it's a permanent blemish, then you're allowed to eat it. It's not a holy animal anymore. The holiness goes away from it. Here he says, What's it talking about? If it's talking about just regular meat that you want to eat, it says this already was spoken about before. This is another commandment. What's it talking about? It's talking about animals that were sanctified, but there occurred in them a blemish. And then you put money down, you redeem them, and then you can eat this animal wherever you want to. You might think that you can, even if it had a temporary blemish, that the temporary blemish was going to go away and the animal would become fit for the sacrifice again, that you could also, right? A temporary blemish is also good. Just you have to get it when it has the blemish. It says, rak, only, rak means to limit. You can't take any animal that falls a blemish in it and redeem it, only if it's a permanent blemish. So it says, Tizbach v'achalta, an animal like this, you're allowed to eat the meat, right? An animal that you sanctified at the temple, but there occurred in it a blemish that disqualified it. So you can redeem it, put down the money, and then you're allowed to eat it. But you're still not allowed to shear it if it's a sheep, or eat the chaylev. The chaylev is the forbidden meats, right? You're not allowed, or use the chaylev, whatever. You're not allowed to use it. Okay. But one thing, if you're going to make a sacrifice, you're not allowed, and the sacrifice becomes impure, and you want to eat it at home. So the blood, you're not allowed to eat. You have to pour it on the ground like water. What does it mean? Even though that it says Rashi, even though that I told you that this animal that has become disqualified, you can pay the money for it. They'll buy a new offering. And this disqualified animal, you can eat it. It's just like regular food. Therefore, obviously, you don't sprinkle the blood on the altar. Every sacrifice that was made, the blood of that sacrifice had to be sprinkled on the altar. There's different ways. Sometimes 2 times, sometimes 4 times. Even though I said you don't have to sprinkle the blood on the altar, so you might think, well, maybe I could eat the blood along with it. He says, no, you have to pour it on the ground. What does it mean? She'ein tzorech kisui. You pour it on the ground, but you don't have to cover it up. When do you have to cover the blood? Covering the blood is another commandment. Only if you eat a bird or a chaya, an antelope, a deer. So those animals, they're kosher animals, they can't be eaten. Then you have to cover the blood. But if you eat a sheep, a goat, or a cow in any form, you cannot eat the blood. You have to split out. And if you want to boil that, you have to put salt on it first. If you want to roast it, you don't have to put on salt because the fire draws out the blood. But you have to get rid of the blood. You can't eat the blood. That's what it means. Another meaning is you could pour it on the ground like water. What does it mean with water? That the blood is permissible to use. You can use it to grow, to fertilize the ground. And also, if blood is one of the 7 liquids, what is it? Yad Shachadam, one of these 7 liquids that make a thing susceptible to accept food, susceptible to accept impurity. Only if food is wet can it be made impure. Made impure if it's touched by a dead body or something like that. Only if it's damp. Not the case of human being. So what are those liquids? There's water, and it says and honey, and the oil. And anyway, one of them is also blood. Blood is a thing. But let's just go a little bit further. Okay, be careful that you do not abandon the Levites. Remember we learned that commandment? You have to be careful. You have to give him, this is a negative commandment. A negative commandment. You have to provide for him where? Al admotecha, only in Israel. Outside of Israel, you don't have to take care of him any more than any other poor Jew. And here's the commandment of whenever you want to eat regular meat. like he says, look, when he says I want to eat meat because I desire to eat meat, here we're talking about regular meat. This is talking about regular meat. It says when God gives you more plenty and he and you say, like he told you, God promised he's going to give you plenty. It's going to be a land that's going to be flowing with all good. And you say, you know what, I want to eat some meat at home because my soul desires to eat meat, right? That's what we thought it was in the previous. So you can eat meat. This is telling, but it's saying, Rashi says this is telling you, Mida derech eretz, is telling you proper etiquette. A person shouldn't desire to eat meat unless he has proper amount of money. In other words, a person should be well off. Meat is not one of the necessities of life. But on the other hand, if you have plenty, and then you can eat meat, you have enough money to give charity, and you give charity to others, etc. But when you were in the desert, for instance, it says the Jewish people, before they came into the land of Israel, they could not eat regular meat. They only could eat meat if they brought it to the temple first. Regular meat. Bird, they could eat. They could eat. They ate the slav, it says they ate. All right, let's go a little bit further. But you just have to be strong not to eat the blood because the blood is the soul. Don't eat the soul with the flesh. That's what it says, chazak. You have to be strong. Strengthen yourself. Be strong. Don't eat the blood of the animal. From here, I remember I was in university when I learned in university. So I sort of kept kosher. I tried not to eat ham, things like that. But I knew some of the laws. One of the laws is that Jewish people don't eat blood. I remember my grandmother, she used to salt the meat. I remember I told my roommate, and this fellow, he was a genius, not a non-Jew. He was learning medicine. And he was a genius. He just remembered things. He could remember like a whole row, a whole half a page of a telephone book, he said. And we were talking, and he said that he heard that the Jewish people couldn't eat meat and milk together. So I said, yeah, it's one of the laws. I said, also not blood. And he just said, what? You can't eat venison with the blood in it? It was just like, it was like such an important thing to him. In any case, I guess to him it was important, but generally speaking, people are not, blood is not that attractive of a thing. But I guess in the desert they were. It says, Atalome, you hear from this, that the Jewish people had a big desire to eat blood. Therefore, the Torah had to say, strengthen yourself. Don't eat blood. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Shimon ben Azai says, Ben Azai, there was Rabbi Ben Azai, Ben Zom, all of them were Shimon. Shimon ben Azai said, this pasuk is not coming to tell you that the Jews really wanted to eat blood and it was telling them not to. No, it was coming to tell you like this. If the Torah warns you not to eat blood, which is an easy thing to avoid, al kama atatzorich litchazek b'mitzvahs, how necessary it is to be strong in the commandments. If blood, which is very, very easy not to eat, and a person does not desire it, the opposite, exactly the opposite of what Rabbi Yehuda said. The people don't care if they have blood or not to eat. Nevertheless, the Torah says you should strengthen yourself and be strong and not eat blood. How much more so to the other commandments, that the other commandments, which you might have a desire to do, which you might have a desire to avoid or whatever, you should strengthen yourself. So if the Torah gives you a special warning, be careful not to eat blood. You say, blood, who wants to eat blood? It's for sure you're telling you to strengthen yourself in things that, forbidden things that you do want to do. Don't eat the soul with the flesh. This is telling you to aver minachai. Don't take a limb from an animal before it's dead. If you take a limb to eat take off a limb from an animal before it dies, then that's two transgressions. First of all, you're eating meat that wasn't slaughtered properly, eating from it. Secondly, you're eating from an animal that was still alive. This is also forbidden for a non-Jew. We talked about that. Don't eat it on the earth. You should pour it like water. You should pour it, but what this is the domatamsi, the blood that actually spurts out from the animal. All right, let us go a little bit further. Let's see how much we're going to go over here. It says, don't eat the blood so that it will be good for you and your children after you, because you have done what's straight in the eyes of God. Don't eat it. And this is talking about the other blood, not just the blood that spurts out, even the blood that's in the limbs. Now, interesting enough, in Judaism, it is permissible to eat meat with the blood in it, as long as you don't boil it. As soon as you start to boil the meat, then the blood comes into the water, and that becomes forbidden. But the blood, when it's still inside of the limbs, you are technically allowed. Right? Don't try it at home. I don't advise anyone to do it. But nevertheless, in fact, it is permissible to do. That's called lechol bu'umsa. To eat a bu'umsa. I don't know anybody who would do it, and I don't know anybody who would want to do it. I hope, anyway. So it says, in order that it will be good for you, and you're doing the straight, what's good and straight thing in the eyes of God. What are you doing? Not eating blood. Go and learn the reward of the commandments. If blood, that a person usually does not like to eat blood, if you separate from it, you get this big commandment, you get this big blessing for you and your children. How much more so if you separate yourself from things that are difficult, stealing, sexual crimes, that a person does want to do it, for sure you get a big reward for separating yourself. All right, let's go a little bit further over here. Let's see if we can get to chapter Yud Gimel. We did this. All right, we did the false prophet. We did that yesterday, right? So if there was not enough time to do this, maybe we'll do it tomorrow. It says you should put the false prophet to death. Okay, next big problem. We're finished with the false prophet. He came and he prophesied all sorts of things, and they all came to pass. And he did all sorts of miracles and signs to prove that his prophecy was right. And then he said, now let's go and serve other gods. Or let's, not do all the commandments. So it says, kill him. Next case. What if your brother, the son of your mother, the son of your father, your daughter, your wife, your good friend, that he's like your soul, he takes you aside privately and he says, let's go and serve other gods that you didn't know, you or your fathers. Serve other gods. But I'm only doing it for your benefit. It says usually that's what it's just talking about. It doesn't have to be in quiet, but that's usually the way things go. He takes you aside and he says, listen, we're friends, right? We've been through thick and thin together. All I want is for your benefit, right? So it says, let's go and serve a new God that our forefathers never served. That's what it means. Let's leave what our forefathers served. A new thing. Let's serve. Then they would serve the sun, the moon. Now, serving the sun and the moon was, it was not such really a bad idea. I mean, it's totally forbidden. But the sun really provides a lot. The sun provides all the fertility of the world, warmth. Without the sun, we'd be finished. That's it. So it's sort of, there's a good place to serve the sun. You can sort of understand the person serving the sun. And then people would serve the stars. They would think, okay, it comes through the stars. Then they would serve other things, the other whatever, and they would get results from it. So that was the whole problem, was the results. A person would get the results from these things, and it's short-lived results, and it was a big test. That's called a masit. That someone comes and says, let's serve another let's serve another God. Let's serve, a person. Let's serve a person. This person really did a lot of benefits from me. And it's not as enormous. The guy's a Jew. A Jew is the son of God, every Jew. Let's go and serve him, and you'll get tremendous benefits from it. You get a big house, and you have this. It says, from one of the gods of the nations that are around us, the ones that are near or that are far, from one end of the earth to the other. It says, why? Because you might think the ones that are nearby, I already know they're not worth anything. What about the far? But there's one far away. Oh, maybe that's worth something. It says, from the end of the earth to the end of the earth, that's the sun and the moon, the stars in the heaven, that they go from one end to the other. They're flitting around up there in heaven. Some beautiful commentary over here, but our time is limited. I want to especially get to one beautiful sentence over here, which we had actually last week also. Don't desire to this person. Don't listen to him. Don't have any mercy on him. Don't have any compassion for him. And don't try to make excuses for him. It says, don't desire what he's saying. Don't love him, because we already said it's your good friend, right? He saved your life several times. And this, don't love. Don't listen to what he says, even if he prays, begs you, please, no, I was just kidding. Leave me alone. Of course, he wasn't kidding. Therefore, because it says there's a pasuk that says you're not allowed to stand by when a Jew is in trouble. You're supposed to help him. Al tamono dam reacha. So it says on this, you're right in other cases, but not this fellow. It comes to show how severe idolatry is. Lo tachmol, don't say anything to his merit. Listen, they're really good people. I heard somebody say, these missionaries, they're really good people. They really have good intentions. They really think that they're helping you. They're really this. Do me a favor. If it was the time of the Torah, they would be killed. If you know anything bad about him, then you're not allowed to keep quiet. You have to kill him. Your hand. No, like I'm saying, nowadays there is no death penalty, so don't go and kill missionaries today. Leave it up to God. But in any case, don't kill missionaries. And if you do it, don't tell them I told you, because it's not so. There's no death penalty today, but you should know that God is definitely displeased. Your hand should be the first one on him to kill him, and her, doesn't make any difference, and everyone else should also follow afterwards. If a person, as soon as he comes out for Beis Din, you have to bring him to Beis Din. You have to bring him to a judicial court, and the judicial court has to decide. So you can't decide on your own, take things into your own hands and be the vigilante or something. The person who he tries to convince, he's the first one that should, and you have to stone him to death. That's the punishment, because he wanted to push you away from God that took you out of the land of Egypt. And all the Jewish people will hear and they will see, and you'll never do this thing again. Okay, that's the individual. What about a whole group? It's called the Irani Dachat, and we don't have any time. We'll have to skip over this, but I just wanted to do one sentence before. Let's just a couple of sentences. If you hear that in one of your cities, a city that God gave to you to dwell in, and came out people from the city, and they convinced everyone else in the city and say, let's serve other gods that we never heard of before. And you looked into it, you made a serious investigation, and behold, it's true. Can such a disgusting thing be done among us? You should destroy the whole city. If the whole city was guilty, then you destroy. If the majority of the city was guilty, then you kill all the people that were guilty. But the whole rest of the city, even the property of the righteous people, because they should have said something or left the city, you have to destroy, they kill everyone in the city by sword, and and all the animals. We're talking about only the people who served the idols. And all the spoils of the city, right? All of the paintings and the money and all the books and everything, gather it into the center of the city and burn the whole thing with fire. Everything in the fire, completely to God, and it'll be a ruins forever and should never be built again. Don't take anything from the city, in order that God's anger will return from it and he'll have mercy on you, like he said. And now we're going to have interesting sentence. Banim atem lashem Elokeichem. You are sons of God, your God. Right? Prove. Another time it says that Jews are the sons of God. That's when God tells Moses to go into to Paro and say, B'ni B'chor Yisrael, my son, my chosen one, Israel. But here it repeats it again. You Jewish people are sons. This is explained also in the Tanya, the second chapter of the Tanya, both of these sentences. What does it mean that the Jews are the sons of God? What does it mean? It explains it very beautifully. Banim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. You Jews are the sons of God. Lo tidgoredu v'lo tasimu korcha b'neinechem lamot. Don't make any slashes on your body for the dead. And also between your eyes, don't make a slash on your eyes for the dead. Because you're a holy people. You're a holy people. L'Hashem. U'b'cha b'char Hashem. And God chose us. So if anybody wants to know, how do you know that God chose the Jews here? It was in the previous sentence. It was previous chapter, last week's reading also. And you, God chose to be for him a special people from all of the nations that are on the face of the earth. And then it explains, what does it mean, don't, you're holy? What's the implication of this? You're the sons of God and you're holy? Don't eat forbidden foods. And now it talks about all the animals that are kosher, the animals that are kosher that you can eat, the behemoth, in other words, don't go and eat any horses or camels or things like that, rabbits. And it explains what they are, and we don't have time to go through it all. God willing, tomorrow we'll go into a little bit more detail. Have a good day with Mashiach. Now, as I told you before, the reason we did not have a class this morning, and we did. If you look at the site, you'll see that there was a class, but there was a power hafsaka. They stopped the electricity here in Kfar Chabad, at least parts of Kfar Chabad. I really haven't got it figured out, but at least in my house for sure, from 8 in the morning until 11 in the morning. And so there was no class in the proper time. So, but if you look in the site, you'll see that I did give 2 classes, and they're over there in Likutei Torah and in Dvar Malchus. Have a good day with Mashiach now, God willing, at 8:15 tomorrow morning, Chassidus. Tomorrow we're going to learn the mimer about Ani Ladodi Li in Likutei Torah.